How's this for a vintage watch? A very long time ago, when the Earth was young, somewhere in the inky blackness of outer space, there was a big clump of molten rock. Over the next 4 billion years, it slowly cooled down, and its interior formed these triangular shapes that scientists call the Widmanstätten pattern. About 1 million years ago, the rock happened to smack into the Earth near what we now think of as the border between Finland and Sweden. It broke into a bunch of pieces, but it wasn't until about 100 years ago that humans started finding pieces of it. Today we call it the Muonio-Lusta meteorite, and a lot of its pieces are in the possession of universities and research institutes. But somehow, someone is willing to sell a piece of it to Traska so they could chop it into little pieces and stick those pieces into this version of their Venturer GMT watch. So I'm sad to report that 4.5 billion years of history have ended here. Now a yahoo like me is using this priceless scientific artifact as a piece of wrist jewelry. Was it worth the sacrifice? Let's find out. First up, let's talk about the dial, the main star of the show here. So this is the dark meteorite version. There was originally a light meteorite version or just a standard meteorite version. This is the second version of this watch, and it uses a darker tint of this meteorite dial. And despite being called dark, it's more gray actually. It isn't quite black. It's a little hard to show in video to get the exact color here, but think of it more as a gray dial than a black one. And because it's made by shaving off a piece of a meteorite, each dial is supposedly unique. I don't know how to verify that. The one in front of this or the one behind it might be about the same. I really couldn't tell you. But overall, it's a cool effect. It might not be ideal for a watch dial, though, as I'll get into a little later. One thing is that the silver hands are a little hard to discern against a gray dial, especially when the dial has a lot of irregular lines, like on this meteorite dial. And at certain angles, it almost looks like cellophane. It has this sort of plasticky sheen to it, which isn't really a great impression. I don't know if it's just because of how they had to chop them. I don't know if the meteorite just does that naturally. I couldn't tell you, but it is a little jarring when you see it under certain lighting conditions. As far as the functionality of this watch goes, first of all, this is a GMT watch, so it has that independent 24-hour hand, which you can set to track whichever time zone you like. And this is a so-called flyer GMT, so the local hour hand is independently adjustable. So the way it works is you pull out the crown 2 clicks, and then, for example, if you're traveling 4 hours ahead somewhere, you pull out the crown, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, push it back in, and you're set. And look, the watch didn't even stop. Then when you go back, you pull out the crown again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're back. So it's very convenient if you are flying somewhere, as long as it has an even number of hours offset from where you currently are. So instead of an external bezel, it has a bezel inside the crystal that's operated by the 10 o'clock crown. So you unscrew the crown, pull it out, and then it swivels around on a little internal bezel. So I actually reviewed the Traska Seafarer a little while back, and it seems to be the exact same system. And it's just on the other side of the case. The Seafarer had it at, I think, around 2 o'clock or so, and the Venturer has it at 10 o'clock. So this seems to be somewhat of an affectation of Traska. They really like this. And I think what it does is it slims down the appearance of the watch. It's not a large external bezel, but there are some downsides, which I'll get to in a minute. Another thing that's nice about this watch is it has quick-release spring bars, so you can put straps on it easily. So it looks quite nice on a leather strap like this, actually. I just had this strap lying around, and I think it looked, the shape of the case and the styling makes it look quite nice against a strap. So you can remove these spring bars or the bracelets without too much trouble, no tools or anything like that. So I'll start with my likes for this watch. I think that 38 millimeters is a pretty good size for a watch. It gives a good presence. It's not too bulky. It's a little bit thick. It kind of needs to be with that extra GMT hand, but not unmanageably so. But I think that 38 millimeters works with a pretty wide variety of wrist sizes. It doesn't look too large, doesn't look too small. I think it's pretty good. And the case and the bracelet finishing are quite nice. Traska's been pretty good with this. I had the same impression of the Seafarer when I reviewed it. I thought that it does look, it's got a nice shine to it. It feels high quality. There's nothing really to complain about on that front. And another thing I was quite surprised with is that the watch keeps very good time. Like, it seems like it's been regulated very well. Mine only ran a few seconds fast a day, and then if I stored it crown up at night, that would sort of slow it down. And kind of managing it that way meant I very rarely had to correct the time on it. So I think the movement is, well, it performs well when it's regulated. It's very functional, very effective. I really like 4 hertz. That smooth sweep you get out of 4 hertz is just it's just quite nice. It makes it seem quite smooth, even though the second hand's a little hard to pick out against the dial. And then I also think it looks kind of nice from a second person perspective, if that makes sense. Like when someone's looking at you with this watch on, it looks stylish. It's kind of classic. It's not too flashy, not too subtle. It's just a nice look to it, I think. So next I'll get to my dislikes, and there were quite a few, unfortunately. The biggest complaint I have about this watch is that the hands are a little dull. They aren't really as polished as the indices, and the lume is significantly dimmer. So I've seen Traska's pictures don't really illustrate this very well. I think they're probably computer renders. They're not actually photos of the watch. I've seen other pictures of people who just have this watch, just cell phone shots, which look like they confirm this, and other people's watches where this issue doesn't seem to be present. But the significantly duller lume and the somewhat non-shiny nature of the hands, combined with the meteorite patterns, means that the hands get very easily lost in the watch face. Like, they feel like they're the dimmest part of the watch. Like the indices really outshine them and out display them, if that makes sense. Like, I guess maybe they have to move around, right? They can't be just fixed in place like the indices. The movement has to be able to torque the hands around. So maybe they can't use lume that's as bright as on the indices, but it just feels strange. Like, it makes the legibility of the watch significantly impaired, and that's one of the most important parts of the watch. Like, you'd want the minute hand and the hour hand to be the most legible parts of the watch, not the least legible. And this also carries over to the lume as well. So there is lume here. It's supposedly pretty good. It's like, I don't even remember the actual specifications of it, but it's supposed to be this nice blue Swiss lume. But the problem is the minute hand is so dim that it fades pretty quickly. And then the hour hand fades not long after that. So if you have the watch in the dark for more than an hour or two, what you find is the indices still look great, but the hands are almost gone, which kind of defeats the point, doesn't it? And then the next complaint I have is with the crystal. Now, Traska's made a bit of a to-do recently about adding more anti-reflective coating onto their crystal, and they say that, it's clearer than ever. But in my experience, it still catches lots of reflections, especially if you're out in bright daylight. It's not illegible. Usually sunlight will illuminate the hands enough to where they are legible, but you will see significant reflections. And I always compare this to my Seiko Astron, which uses something called super clear coating from Seiko. I think it's a different shape. It's a flatter crystal on the Seiko, which can probably deal with reflections better. And I believe it has anti-reflective coating on both the inside and outside of the crystal. But it's just once you're used to Seiko super clear coating, or maybe other coatings which do both sides, I think the Traska is just, it's not up to par. It still catches a lot of reflections, and once you notice them, you don't stop noticing them. And compared to my Seafarer, the clasp seems to have gone through a bit of a downgrade. The inside of it is a little scrapey against the wrist, so it can be uncomfortable if it's moving around on your wrist. Unless you have it pretty tight, it feels just a little sharp and pointy there on the inside of your wrist where it really shouldn't. And then finally, the adjustable bezel, as I mentioned earlier, has the same weakness as the Seafarer, where because of the screw-down crown, you have to push it in. And if the threads catch, then it's okay, it's great. But it's always a gamble. What often happens is you push it in, but the threads didn't catch, so as you twist it, it immediately knocks it out of the position you were trying to put it in. So sometimes unscrewing the bezel, unscrewing the crown, adjusting the bezel, and putting it back in, that might take 2 or 3 tries. In a GMT watch, you're not doing this as often as you would on a dive watch, but it's still just not executed as well as it should be. You always find yourself sort of dreading having to change it. And at that point, I would live with a larger external bezel if it were just easier to adjust like that. Either I feel like Traska should either go with the external bezel or just have a fixed bezel and styling the watch based on that way. Because I think that, yeah, this sort of compromise doesn't really end up functioning very well. So for my overall verdict for this watch, having owned it for a good month or two, I feel like Meteorite dials are sort of an affectation. They don't improve legibility. They're a fun idea, but you really have to want one. You have to be willing to put up with it. I think that it doesn't, despite the additional expense, it doesn't really pay for itself in terms of extra functionality. It's kind of nice, but it isn't as, I find the design isn't as pleasant to look at as a design that's specifically created to be a watch dial. And in some ways you could say maybe it's a little bit like a mechanical watch where, you have to want the inconvenience. You have to enjoy that part of it because it's not as practical as a normal face would be. I think the Venture does its job. It works very well, but you can also find a lot of other watches with the same movement. That's the Miyota 9075, if the styling doesn't really speak to you. So there's a world of competitors for this. I'll try and link a list of some of them. But if you like the idea of this watch, this GMT, but don't particularly want this particular Traska, then believe me, there's a wide world of them out there for you if you're interested. And if you were set on the Traska Venture, I would recommend the model in white, just so that the hands have more contrast against the dial. Because I feel like, yeah, with the hands having somewhat dim lume, not being shined enough, not being polished enough, they just need a lot more contrast against the dial if you want to actually read the time. So if you've probably noticed that I've been mentioning this in the past tense, I did sell mine. I kept it for about 2 months, and I really anticipated it a lot when I ordered it, but I didn't find it to be as pleasant and as nice as I thought it would be. So I ended up selling it for most of what I paid for it. So overall, I have to conclude that maybe I should be kept away from the mysteries of the universe like this. So I hope that's helped anybody who's interested in picking one of these up. So thanks, and see you next time.